What comes to mind when you think of pyramids? This almost triangular shape is seen in cultures all over the world, from the pyramids in ancient Egypt to church spires in Europe, pagodas in China, and richly decorated gopurams in India. The structure connects the earth with the heavens and life with afterlife. The existence of these buildings is often well documented, and recordings were shared again and again. They were shared, reshared, interpreted, and misinterpreted. Today we look at a photograph of the Menashki Temple in Madurai from Maps collection and a pair of flower pyramids from the Rijksmuseum collection. The gopurams at the entrance of the temple and the multi-tiered delftware vases share the pyramidal structure. What connections and histories will they reveal?
The Meenakshi Temple complex in Madurai is one of the most well-known in India. It is dedicated to Meenakshi, a form of the goddess Parvati, and Sundareshwara, a form of Shiva. The large temple complex includes 14 gopurams, multi-story tapered structures covered in polychrome sculpture. The photograph in Maps collection shows the tallest southern gopuram, which was rebuilt in the 16th century. The photograph was taken around 1895 by Wheeler and Klein, one of the largest photo studios in southern India at the time. The handful of people and cattle scattered on the street in front of the gopura form a sharp contrast to the deities depicted on each of the 9 stories. Over 1,500 deities on the tower narrate legends from Hindu texts. The 4 people in the foreground of the picture look directly at the camera and thus at the viewer. They add an interpretive layer to the photograph, not just as a recording of a historical monument, but also captioning a particular moment in time for a particular audience.
During the 17th and 18th centuries, Asian art was very popular among the European elites. Chinese porcelain, Japanese lacquer, and Indian textiles were imported in a large scale. European artists were inspired by these works of art and created their own iterations in a style known as chinoiserie. And even though they looked at Chinese and Japanese and also Indian objects for inspiration, their depictions of Asian people are often imprecise and sometimes even racist. In the 1650s, Delft potters started creating a kind of earthenware that mimicked the qualities of Chinese porcelain. And apart from making direct copies of cups and saucers and jugs, they also made more original pieces that were inspired by this kind of broad Asian aesthetic. Flower pyramids, like the one that we see here, were originally part of the patronage of Mary Stuart II, the wife of settler William III, to the Delft potteries. Each of the spouts was filled with individual flowers, creating a kind of elongated bouquet that fitted very well with the Baroque aesthetic. Each segment of the flower pyramid is decorated with scenes based on Chinese porcelain, while the finial has the shape of the bust of a woman. The legs at the bottom are created in the shape of 9 holding a globe, while the first segments are held up by mythological sea creatures. So there's a confluence of cultural appropriations and inspirations here.
Photographs in this period in India had a dual purpose. They were made as commercial products sold to colonial elites and European travelers, but were also used by the British for surveying and record keeping. In other words, as a tool of administrative power and control. While they provided useful archives of Indian monuments and heritage sites, they could not be viewed as objective. Such images were also used for propaganda purposes, allowing the British to show Indians as neglectful of their own heritage. This dual role can also be found in much earlier recordings of other pyramidal structures as well. One example of this is an engraving of the porcelain pagoda of Nanjing. The tapered structure of the pagoda, which was covered in large porcelain tiles, became famous in Europe in the 17th century after it was reproduced in a travelogue based on the observations of a Dutch traveller, Johan Niehoofs. His notes and drawings were initially intended as a record of the embassy for the Dutch East India Company. Later, however, they were published commercially. Like in the photograph of the Gopura, groups of people populate the square that surround the pagoda, creating a contrast between the impressive structure and the small figures at its foot. Like in the photograph too, they have an othering effect, for the people in both recordings are clearly seen through Western eyes. Travelogues like Niehoofs were an important source of inspiration for artists and craftsmen in Europe in the development of the chinoiserie style.
Just as with the photograph of the Gopura, the Lul's pagoda is seen through a different medium that in turn inspired the Delft pyramids. It all speaks to an idea of exchange between these cultures. The buildings, its reproductions, and the works of art that they in turn inspire all tell a story of how people all over the world continue to be inspired by the form of the pyramid and all its possible meanings.